Thank you for joining today, and thank you to CDER's SBIA program staff for hosting this webinar. We conducted 3 previous IDMP webinars, and the links to them are at the end of this presentation. Today we will focus on the FDA IDMP guidance, IDMP implementation, its use cases, but first some quick IDMP basics. IDMP stands for Identification of Medicinal Products. It is a suite of 5 ISO standards that were released in 2012 and describe how to standardize information and create identifiers for medicinal product ID, pharmaceutical product ID, as well as substance, dose form, and strength. Implementing the ISO IDMP standards globally would facilitate the unique identification of medicinal product in the context of pharmacovigilance and safety throughout the world via communications between organizations. The identifiers defined by ISO can be both global and regional. The identifiers for the complete medicinal product, the packaged product, are created at the national level. In each country where the medicinal product is approved, the local regulatory authority assigns their national MPID or medicinal product identifier and the package ID, since they are identifiers based on the packaging for that particular country. The diagram depicts the 5 standards and how data from 3 of the standards, global substance ID, strength, and global dose form, will be used to generate the global PHPID, which will uniquely identify products. In March of this year, CBER and CDER published Guidance for Industry, IDMP Implementation and Use. Until the publication of this guidance, FDA had no formal policy on IDMP. Our purpose was to provide FDA's position on the IDMP standards, but also to describe how its standards are aligned. The guidance is strategically focused on the harmonization of the standards for international exchange of information. The guidance describes our 5 key objectives: to inform industry that FDA standards for medicinal product ID are NDC code, the substance ID, the UNI, and for strength, Unified Code for Units of Measure, or UCUM, conform to the IDMP standards. Second objective, to recognize that FDA sees key benefits to global implementation of the standards. As you will see with the use cases later, pharmacovigilance and medical product traceability and supply chain integrity are key. And of course, IDMP will allow the identification and exchange of medicinal product information independent of registration origin. The third objective, FDA must continue to collaborate with international stakeholders to ensure that global implementation of the standards is realized. Fourth objective, global implementation is not easy. So we understand that it will take time to ensure that the standards are fit for global implementation. And we are engaged with the relevant stakeholders to make this happen. And lastly, the guidance makes it clear that there is a need for a framework for the maintenance of global identifiers. We are actively engaged in this as well. As an outcome of a 2019 WHO meeting in Geneva, the Global IDMP Working Group was chartered. There was no organization focused on demonstrating that the standards could be implemented globally. The GIDWG, as it is called, was founded by the EMA, FDA, WHO UMC, and currently IFPMA, Health Canada, and Anvisa are members. Other memberships are pending. Its focus is simple. Its tasks and activities are very complex. As you will hear from TJ, GIDWG has developed and conducted projects to test whether the IDMP standards can be implemented globally. As I mentioned with respect to the FDA guidance, we need a framework, business rules, and operating model for the implementation and maintenance of the identifiers. GIDWG is a collaborative initiative to make sure there is a robust framework for PHPID operations and maintenance. Worldwide collaboration between regulators and relevant experts is pivotal. You can see how expansive the IDMP implementation is on a global scale. The PHPID and its levels for trastuzumab. The PHPID is generated here at four different levels, depending on the granularity of the information that is available. The first level you can see here is just using unique global substance identifier. The second level is generated using substance in combination with strength. The third level is generated using substance identifiers in combination with dose form. And please note that the PHPID uses dose form characteristics to describe the dose form. The fourth level is generated using all three components. One of the cool things with IDMP standards, or more specifically the IDMP identifiers, is that they help identify products that are like each other regardless of the jurisdiction where they are approved. In this example, salbutamol is marketed in many countries under different names. Both salbutamol and salbutamol sulfate is used on the packages. However, the products do contain the same substance and have the same dose, form, and strength. Salbutamol, suspension for inhalation, and 100 micrograms per meter dose. By linking like products in different countries to a unique global PHPID, one can see the benefit of the global PHPID. The global PHPID becomes the medicinal product's common denominator, if you will, from country to country, regardless of where it is prescribed, dispensed, and used. Here are the 5 GIDWG projects. As we have been working to test the standards using publicly available data, we have been developing the framework for the global operation and maintenance of the identifiers, as well as working with HL7 on the fire exchange standard. So here is our journey so far. We finalized the use cases for the end-to-end testing in October in a meeting in Amsterdam and held a remote public meeting for stakeholders. Our plan is to initiate the end-to-end testing in this quarter and to conclude in early 2024. Now I would like to turn it over to TJ, who will walk you through each GIDWG project and the first use case on cross-border healthcare.
Thank you, Ron. In this section, I will walk through the principles and the scopes of GIDWG's project, and followed by the cross-border healthcare end-to-end use case. In 2022, the Global IDMP Working Group kicked off 5 projects with the aim to identify and develop consensus on the processes, best practice, business rules, and an operating model to establish a framework on the maintenance of global substance identifiers and the global pharmaceutical product identifiers for the marketed medicinal product. All 5 projects are worked to support global pharmacovigilance, to mitigate product shortage, and to assist cross-border healthcare. During the past 18 months, the GIDWG Working Group, including pharmacists and experts from US FDA, Health Canada, EU regulators, and WHO UMC, have validated more than 5,600 medicinal products from Brazil, USA, Belgium, Finland, Norway, and other European countries, and have concluded that based on the current business rules, we can assign global PHPIDs to between 92 and 99% of the products, depends on the complexity of the data set. The first project is Global Substance Identifier, GSID project. The goal of the project is to identify and agree to a globally harmonized approach to capture the standardized substance information and to assign global substance identifier. The project team works closely with the signature field subgroup under ISO Technical Committee 215, Working Group 6, to utilize the core information or the minimum data set to identify substance. Substance ID is a key building block for PHPID at all levels. The project also to establish business rule on using proper GSID to generate global PHPIDs. And the last goal is to establish a mechanism to use confidential data in GSID assignment. This is an area that still needs more discussion due to the sensitivity of the confidential information. The general business rule for GSID are: the GSID assignment is based on ISO 11238 and the related technical specification 19844. The business rule should clarify the standard when needed. Use substance information only from the public domain to assign GSIDs. And the general business rules for the PHPIDs are: PHPID assignment is based on ISO 11616. The PHPID is assigned only to the marketed medicinal product. Using appropriate GSID to generate PHPID in consistent manner. And we will discuss what is appropriate GSID for PHPID in next slide. All active ingredients and their corresponding GSID will be used in the PHPID assignment. So the diagram depicts the relationships of GSID with different information captured. First, a substance ID can be assigned to the active moiety, or the salt, or the hydrate, and also can be assigned to the specified substance group 1 substance, the SSG1 substance. ISO 11238 describes SSG1 substance as mixture. But then, which GSID is a proper GSID to use to generate PHPID? The project team has decided to use the non-hydrate salt or active moiety for the generation of PHPID, and only use SSG1 substance ID for certain products. So the rule: the active ingredients disregarding hydrates is used. GSID can be assigned at both substance and SSG1 level. SSG1 is only used in certain cases where SSG1 is important to distinguish between the different products. The example here shows Novolog insulin flex pen and Novolog's mix 7030. The flex pen contains 100 units of fast-acting insulin aspart, and the Novolog's mix contains a mixture of 2 insulins, 70 units of intermediate-acting insulin aspartame, and 30 units of fast-acting insulin aspart. To accurately describe the difference between the 2 products and to reduce the risk of associating 2 products with 2 different release rates, substance level GSID is used for the flex pen, and SSG1 level GSID is used for the Novolog mix to generate 2 different PHPID for the 2 products. The construct of GSID follows the ISO IEC 15459 Part 3. It starts with GSID as a qualifier to indicate that the identifier is generated by the GIDWG for the global substance. It then followed by 12 alphanumeric characters randomly generated by the system. And the last character is the check character or the checksum for the integrity of the identifier. A business rule on the sequence of GSID as an input to generate PHPID for medicinal product with multiple substances is based on the order or the value of each GSID in the product. A quick background on dose form and dose form characteristics before we get into Project 2. As Ron mentioned in his presentation earlier, during 2018 and 2021, we have worked on the dose form solution for the global implementation of ISO IDMP. dose form or some kind of representation of dose form is needed to generate level 3 and level 4 PHP-IDs. Because there's no globally or cross-regions agreement on the dose form terminologies, each region or each jurisdiction can have their own dose form terms, and the regional terms varies in granularity and definitions. It is impossible to map those dose form terminologies among regions, and also not possible to harmonize the dose form term across regions. However, the ISO 11239 standard specifies that each pharmaceutical dose form would have 7 associated characteristics, which we will see in the next slide. Using the combination of 4 characteristics to replace a dose form term as input to generate global PHP-ID to associate products with same substance, same strength, and slightly different dose form across region. This approach was tested by a joint project between US FDA and WHO UMC, and the result confirmed that it is a feasible approach to achieve global harmonization without the need for the regulators to make any change to the regional dose form. The scopes of the dose form project is to further investigate the 4 dose form characteristic approach on larger data sets from at least additional region to ensure that the process to assign dose form characteristic is scalable and can be automated. Also to discover additional challenges, potential solutions, and to document and formalize the business rules. The diagram on the right depicts the 7 characteristics associated with the pharmaceutical dose form as specified in ISO 11239. The 4 characteristics selected to represent a dose form are basic dose form, release characteristic, intended site, and administration method. The basic dose form characteristic enable us to aggregate pharmaceutical dose form to a higher level. An example is soft capsule, hard capsule, and plain capsule all have the same basic dose form as capsule. That enable us to group medicinal product with slightly different capsule dose form together. The release characteristic, intended site, and administration method are all important characteristics for a pharmaceutical dose form, and also important for pharmacovigilance and patient care. Hence, the 4th characteristic was selected. A centrally maintained dose form characteristic terms and codes by the EDQM are used in these activities. The dose form characteristics are generally assigned based on product label information, but in many cases, additional information like dosing and administration from the SMPC or the product insert are needed to determine a proper dose form characteristic. When a product can be used in more than one way, the focus should be on the primary use or the term with more strict microbiological requirement. An example in capsule filled with granule or powder, which is normally swallow the capsule as a whole, but it can also be break open and sprinkle the powder or the granule on food or juice for some application. And in this case, the primary use for the administration method is swallowing. In other cases, administration method and intended site characteristic can be assigned more than one terms when it is not possible to identify the primary use. And we will see example in the next slides. The first dose form, suspension for injection. All characteristic has only one value. Suspension as a basic dose form, intended site is parenteral, administration method is injection, and it has conventional release characteristic. So the dose form identifier is the concatenation of the characteristic code 0085, 0011, 0033, and 0047. The next pharmaceutical dose form, oral drops, suspension, can be administered as instillation or as suspension for drinking and swallowing. In this case, both 0013 and 0019 are used together with other characteristics as the dose form characteristic, because there's no clear primary use, so two values are used in this case. Part 3 project is about medicinal product strengths. We have seen some products represented with different strength unit and different strength value in different regions. One example is the Pfizer COVID vaccine. Some regions measure the strength by infectious unit and some by the viral particle. Different unit, very different value for the strengths. One of the scope and deliverable for the project is to identify and address different representations of strengths for product in different regions. ISO IDMP describes strengths in two different approaches: presentation strengths for product like tablet, capsule, or a sachet, and concentration strengths for product in liquid or semi-solid form like cream, lotion, or ointment. The project needs to clarify the use of presentation strengths and concentration strengths as input to generate PHP-ID. And the project is also to explore the pattern framework further to ensure proper strength is used according to the dose form. And we will discuss about the pattern framework in next slide. The project also needs to ensure the process is scalable and can be automated, and to formalize business rules for each pattern and the dose forms. The pattern framework determines how the strength should be expressed for certain type of product. It is clear to use the presentation strengths like 100 mg per tablet, 200 mg per capsule for pattern A, right? But pattern B and C will need additional business rules to clarify the use of strengths. So let's take a look at the next slide. Lovenox is marketed with various strengths from 30 mg per 0.3 ml to 100 mg per 1 ml as pre-filled syringe or graduated pre-filled syringe. And all these products shown in the first 3 bullets have the same concentration strength at 100 mg per milliliter. We will end up have the same PHP-ID for all these products if we opt to use the concentration strength as input to generate PHP-ID. And we are running a risk of associate products with different strengths or different volume together, right? Since these products are single dose application, we have determined that it is best to differentiate the product and use the strength or the volume for each syringe to represent the strength as input to generate PHP-ID. And so the business rule is to use pattern A for a single dose liquid and concentration. Multi-dose liquid or semi-solid product follow pattern B, but some region represent the strength as percentage and some region as milligram per gram. So another business rule is to convert percentage to milligram per gram to harmonize product strengths in all regions. Pattern C. Concerning product with continuous systematic delivery over a period of time. The example is a fentanyl transdermal system. Should the strength be the total amount of fentanyl delivered over the 72 hours period, or the release rate as indicated? And do we need to consider the size of a page and determine the strength per square inch? So those are questions that we have come up during the project testing, right? So the approach is to take a simple approach by using the strength in the product insert and disregard the product dimension. So in this case, it is 12.5 microgram per hour, as shown as in the product insert, instead of 12 microgram per hour, as shown on the carton or on the bottle. So of course, the business rule identified and documented during this pilot or these projects are not set on stone, right? Some may need to be revised or refined as we learn more about the product and as we see more product from more regions. Project number 4, the operating model. This project is almost like the end game of all other projects. This project is to build consensus-based operating model to support WHO UMC to serve as the international standard maintenance organization for global substance identifier and global pharmaceutical product identifier. The project needs to demonstrate an end-to-end operating for requesting, generating, maintaining, and servicing global substance identifier and global pharmaceutical product identifiers to satisfy the 3 use cases of global pharmacovigilance, drug shortage, and cross-border healthcare, and of course, other use cases if possible, right? The process is defined based on the experience of working on the limited medicinal product data set from EU, US FDA, and Anvisa. So this slide shows the operating model, each rectangle corresponding to an activity in the framework, and it is created based on the best practice for maintenance process. As mentioned in the previous slide, the process is based on the experience that we have on processing the limited EU, US FDA, and Anvisa data set. So the scope of the end-to-end testing is to validate and generate PHPIDs for product based on GIDWG business rule with broader data set from at least 1 more countries, and including countries using EDQM dose form and countries that don't use EDQM as dose form. To test large batch loading and generating of PHPID, and also small batch or a single request of PHPIDs. The candidate data set for the testing has been suggested to be submitted from Brazil, USA, Health Canada, Swissmedic, EMA, and Norway, but there are still discussions to include data set from Japan or Korea. And the last project is IDMP using HL7 file message. The goal is to identify and resolve challenges regarding to electronic and automatic exchange of medicinal product and substance information. Project team participated in the developing, verifying, and balloting HL7 file resource related to the ISO IDMP based on the current identified global use cases, the pharmacovigilance, cross-border healthcare, and drug shortage. Also, to determine IDMP product and substance data set to be exchanged between US, EU, and WHO UMC according to the use case. To demonstrate in HL7 file connector zone and other stakeholder events, and we have just completed a successful cross-border healthcare use case testing during the September 2023 HL7 connectathon, which I will get into the detail in the next couple slides. Now let's take a deep dive into the 3 end-to-end use cases. I will go through the cross-border healthcare use case, and Sonia will walk through the pharmacovigilance use cases, and Ron will present the drug shortage use case. The storyboard was created by Robert Stegwey of SAM Technical Committee 251 for cross-border healthcare use case, and it was tested in the September HL7 connectathon. So the story starts like this. Tanaka embarks on an international journey from Japan to the United States for his anticipated 3 weeks vacation. A few days after arriving USA, Tanaka discovered that he does not carry adequate amount of medicine for his hypertension treatment. Luckily, he was able to access the electronic prescription for his medication, which he can present to the US pharmacist. The prescription has headers in English, while the rest of the information are all in Japanese. So Tanaka presents his prescription to the American pharmacist and hopes that the pharmacist can fulfill the medication requirement based on the foreign prescription. However, the pharmacist in US cannot type in the Japanese brand name into the system to search for adequate product. And also he is concerned about the potential misinterpretation of the Japanese prescription. So he cannot dispense a similar or equivalent US medicinal product for Tanaka. So in this case, without his medication, Tanaka may have to cut his vacation short and return to Japan to get his medication for his treatment. So what if we have global PHPID as the one shown in red with Tanaka's mobile prescription? The label for global PHPID in Japanese prescription would allow the American pharmacist to search in his system for medication that are approved in the United States and that are share the same label for PHPID and dispense the appropriate one for Tanaka. So Tanaka can continue his treatment and stay in US to complete his vacation. So the scenario was tested during the HL7 connector zone, as we mentioned earlier, but it has additional steps to test the GIDWG operating model. The pharmacist, or the person who played the role as a pharmacist, submitted the Japanese prescription to WHO UMC Global PHPID service. The WHO UMC service can interpret various languages and has a repository of medicinal products from many regions. So the service returned label for PHPID for the Japanese prescription and the associated medicinal product in the United States with the same label for PHPID. So the pharmacist can then further inquire the electronic product labeling, the SPL, for further analysis and then decide or determine which medicinal product is most appropriate to dispense for Tanaka. So as the connector zone demonstrated, GIDWG operating model provides the ability to generate and maintain PHPID as requested, can connect to a medicinal product repository to associate like medicinal product in different regions with the label for global PHPIDs. So as the slide shows, global PHPID connected dot. So with that, I'm turning the presentation to Sonia. Sonia, thank you.
So hello, thank you for the opportunity to take part in this webinar. My name is Sonia Brajovic. I am a member of the GIDWG work group, and next 10 minutes or so I'll talk about the value of global PHPIDs in pharmacovigilance. Please note the following slides were presented by Malin Faldwell at the GIDWG public meeting in October. So there are several areas where global PHPIDs can add value in pharmacovigilance, but also keep in mind that with the availability of global PHPID data, we will find more and more ways to integrate such data into our pharmacovigilance practices. So first, let's just look at routine signal detection of any adverse event. So this example reflects a real case. There is a report where the suspect product is methotrexate that's administered 15 milligrams weekly in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. And the reported adverse event is disabling, painful extremity spasms 1 to 3 times a day that are very intense. Now just note that muscle spasms are not stated in the current label for methotrexate. So there are similar reports that are received at various national centers. The individual case safety reports are in digital format. They contain local languages in the free text data elements. So you can see that the information is heterogeneous in these individual case safety reports in different regions. Different terminology may be used in the regional coding practices and analysis. For example, the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System that contains our adverse event report data codes the suspect products to our homegrown FAERS product dictionary. Uppsala Monitoring Center receives the individual case safety reports continually. They're ingested into Vigibase, the WHO global database of reported adverse events. And here the suspect products are auto-coded against the WHO drug dictionary, but a number will fall out requiring manual intervention. Now, because of the huge number of cases that come in, the number that requires manual coding is large, requires resources both in terms of personnel and time. And this delays the availability of cases for analysis. So then the question is, what if we had global PHPIDs? Well, in our example, the product is a pre-filled pen with a solution containing 15 milligrams of methotrexate. So for that particular suspect product, the PHPID level can be generated at the level 4 level of information. For a report that only contains methotrexate for the suspect product, the PHPID would be level 1, substance, and so on. So the PHPIDs are assigned depending on the available information for the suspect drug, but the data would be there, making the cases available for analysis. So the individual case safety reports that contain heterogeneous information would have the common layer of the global PHPID identifiers assigned to the most specific data available for the suspect product. Then signal generation then can be done at these different global PHPID levels. And this speeds up analysis and also the flexibility of slicing and dicing the data at different granularity levels enables one to see which particular data elements show for the suspect drug and adverse event of interest. So in this case, it was methotrexate sodium, 15 milligram strength that was reported as with the adverse event of the muscle spasms. So the signal generation with the additional global PHPID levels is immediate, it is quick, and it is flexible, which then means that there is more time to do the analysis and take any regulatory action to prevent harm to patients. And then in summary, there may be 15 individual case safety reports from Netherlands and a handful here and there, but all of these cases would have the assigned global PHPIDs as they ingested into Vigibase, and then the global case series can be easily generated. For this example, there were 397 reports from 18 countries where the suspect products was methotrexate sodium 15 milligram strength, and the reported adverse event was muscle spasms. So the signal is generated, the data is ready for further analysis. Next, we'll take a look how global PHPIDs could aid in the identification of substandard products. This case is also a real situation. It is, as of August of this year, there are a number of countries where the unexpected serious incidents and fatalities have been reported in children under the age of 5 after treatment with over-the-counter cough and cold medications. The investigation identified toxic levels of the ethylene glycol and ethylene glycol. And these we know from prior similar incidents as toxic substances which may sometimes infiltrate the medicinal product composition and cause serious adverse events and fatalities. They are toxic. They are prohibited from being in human food or medications, but sometimes intentionally because they are cheaper than other solvents, or unknowingly, accidentally, they make their way into products. The WHO medical product alerts are issued for specific batches of such substandard or contaminated products that are identified, investigated, confirmed. But then the question is, where else could these products be? They may have been marketed under the same product name or a different name in a different country, and maybe they're still on a shelf somewhere. So it's important to quickly identify all such products of interest so that action can be taken to protect lives. So what if we implemented global PHPIDs? Well, the first PHPID level 1 is generated based on that global substance identifier. So in this case, it is acetaminophen. The second level, global PHPID level 2, is generated based on the substance identifier in combination with strength. So in this case, acetaminophen 100 milligrams per milliliter. The PHPID level 3 is generated using the substance identifier in combination with dose form. And then the level 4 combines all three. So signal generation with global PHPID level 1 would show the commonality for all of these products to contain the same substance, acetaminophen. And the alert for many of these unexpected child fatalities was after treatment with acetaminophen, either as a single or a multi-ingredient product. Without identifying this common ingredient, the common substance, if one was only to look at the product names, the signal would be very diluted because there are so many of these. And keep in mind that over-the-counter products are often reported initially by the product name only, and then there is further investigation to determine the active ingredient and other attributes for the product. So the acetaminophen is the USAN name, and paracetamol, its counterpart in the INN terminology, is an ingredient in over 20,000 products globally. So it's important to be able to quickly identify which of these may be products of concern. And using the global PHPID level 3 identifier would group together all of these products that share the same substance and the dose form. In this case, acetaminophen solutions and acetaminophen suspensions. These were the products among the thousands that are products of interest for this toxic presence of the ethylene glycol. So the global take-home message is that availability of global PHPIDs enables us to quickly look at global data for common denominators, for the substance strength, dose, or all three together. So it enables us to quickly interrogate global data at different levels of granularity to see where the signal is, and thus have quicker analysis and any needed regulatory action. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Next, I would like to present the global IDMP use case for drug shortages, and specifically about the recent cisplatin drug shortage. It is important to note that drug shortages are complex, and there is no drug shortage situation that is the same. Cisplatin is used as a chemotherapy drug to treat a wide range of cancers, including breast, ovarian, throat, lung, testicular, prostate, and colorectal cancers. And for many cancer patients, it is the standard of care. This year's cisplatin drug shortage in the United States was caused by a quality-related manufacturing issue at one of the primary approved production facilities. It was reported that other approved marketing authorization holders were unable to meet the demand for this product. In the U.S., marketing authorization holders are required to notify the regulatory agency that the patient demand for cisplatin cannot be met. Regulators cannot require the marketing authorization holders to increase production. Once notified, the regulatory response is prompt, of course. The first step is to reach out to approved or pending U.S. application holders. The second step, depending on the significance of the shortage, would be to reach out to international jurisdictions to identify potential non-U.S. sources of cisplatin. Some of the challenges in resolving a shortage by sourcing in another jurisdiction include quantity. No one wants to create an artificial shortage by sourcing from a manufacturer that has limited quantity. So quantity is very important. Different strength than the product in short supply. No local distributors. How do you get the product once it's in the country, in the U.S., how do you get it to the point of care? And time. Time is critical as well. Time lag to import could have harmful impact on patients. One key aspect of responding to drug shortages is communications to stakeholders through a national drug shortages database, as well as Dear Healthcare professional letters. The cisplatin shortage was first posted on the FDA website February 10th of this year. So what does this mean for the patients? Here is a scenario. It is March of this year. We are in a hospital and a patient has been diagnosed with stage 3 throat cancer. He is informed by his doctor that obtaining cisplatin, a critical component of his treatment, was not feasible due to an ongoing shortage. The healthcare center responsible for the patient's care is diligently pursuing procurement of any available cisplatin product within the country, while at the same time considering alternative treatments. The hospital is not alone. A survey of the National Comprehensive Cancer Network reports that 70% of their centers acknowledge experiencing a shortage of cisplatin. Instead, his medical team prescribes carboplatin, a platinum-based alternative for his condition. Generally, if a patient was receiving treatment with cisplatin prior to a shortage, they would be prioritized over a new patient in order to continue to receive cisplatin therapy. The shortage of cisplatin injection within the United States has persisted since February of 2023. So what is the impact of the ongoing shortage? Well, the Association of Clinical Oncology reported that in 2022, approximately 100,000 Americans were diagnosed with ovarian, bladder, and testicular cancers. Cancers which may rely on cisplatin or carboplatin for treatment. And similarly, this year, as many patients and up to 500,000 may not have access to treatment. Further, drug shortages lead to other consequences, including delays in treatment, dose adjustments, transitions to alternate therapies. Such changes, alterations, raise the issue of possible medication errors and as adverse events. In order to prevent as many patients from being without their treatment, regulatory action is prompt. However, identification of an ex-US product is challenging and time-consuming. A comprehensive evaluation of available cisplatin products proves to be challenging due to an inadequate global resource containing information about like medicinal products harmonized with global identifiers. A comprehensive evaluation of global cisplatin facilities proves challenging due to the lack of international interoperability and standardized global identifiers. So approximately 4 months after the shortage was identified, FDA announced in May the temporary importation of non-US labeled cisplatin injection. The foreign substitute is manufactured by Qilu Pharmaceutical Company in China. Only Qilu or its distributor, Apotex, is authorized by the FDA to import or distribute Qilu cisplatin injection in the United States. Healthcare professionals are notified. Qilu cisplatin injection retains its original vial and carton labels in Chinese. The product was not being relabeled or repackaged to swiftly address the drug shortage. A Dear Healthcare letter was disseminated to relevant stakeholders explaining labeling and packaging distinctions. So, following these developments, patients, physicians, pharmacists, and healthcare facilities are now equipped to access and understand how to use the medication. The patient can receive the prescribed therapy, and you can see he's very happy. So back to PHPID and drug shortages. What value would it have? Well, if we had a global PHPID at level 4 connected to a global resource of medicinal products, we could identify like products regardless of any variations in terminologies adopted in a particular jurisdiction where they were approved. In the Qilu case, you see the two cisplatin products have their pharmaceutical labeling characteristics described and presented differently. However, with global PHPID at level 4, we know these two products share the same global substance ID, the same strength, 1 milligram per mil, and the same dose form characteristics that you see listed there. And this is solution for injection. So what's the potential added value of global PHPID identifiers? Well, the PHPID identifiers should enable drug shortage groups to quickly, more accurately, and uniquely identify medicinal product alternatives worldwide. It would help, of course, in the early stages of a shortage. Global PHPID must be connected to a medicinal product information that provides information on the country of sales, marketing authorization holder, and the marketing status. Further, there's potential to save time, perhaps days to weeks, in finding a substitute. There would then be a better use of resources if a substitute is identified in the early stages, and preventing harm to patients, because there would be no need for alternative treatments or perhaps less effective treatments. So here are 6 references for this use case. Feel free to read more detail about this particular drug shortage. So we have initiated the end-to-end testing, and we will report back when we have additional results. Our journey continues. So for now, I'd like to thank TJ and Sonia for their participation, and I would like to thank you all in the audience who have taken the time to attend today. Appreciate it. I would like to thank those listed here and others for their contributions to the material presented in this webinar. This could not have been done without the support of colleagues at these organizations. Here are links to the past SBIA IDMP webinars. And so that's it for now. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you all for the great presentations. We'll now transition to our Q&A session. If you haven't had a chance to submit your questions via the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Please remember to indicate the speaker to whom the question is being addressed. Looks like we do have some questions coming in right now. The first group of questions came in for Dr. Ron Fitzmartin. Here's the first question for Dr. Fitzmartin. Will you please confirm that this is the only applicable to finished drugs and it is not applicable to bulk API drug substances?
Thanks, Ray, for that question. IDMP is applicable for both finished pharmaceutical dose forms and for active drug substances. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Here's the next question for Dr. Fitzmartin. Is there any cooperation on PHPID with EMA?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we've been collaborating with European Medicines Agency for quite some time now on IDMP. And not only do we cooperate and collaborate one-on-one, but also within ISO, the TC215 Workgroup 6, and also within the GIDWG, because FDA and EMA are two of the founding members of the Global IDMP Working Group. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a few more questions for Dr. Fitzmartin, and here's the next question. What will be the process to endorse identifiers for dose form and substance for global implementation of IDMP, and what organizations will do this?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Ray. It's clear that we do need an international regulatory body to review and endorse global IDMP identifiers. However, one has not been recognized at this time. But again, based on our policy that we have set forth in the IDMP guidance, we are working toward that goal. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have one more question this round for Dr. Fitzmartin. You noted in your presentation that the NDC, UNI, and UCUM conform to ISO standards. What about dose form terminology?
Yeah, thanks, Ray, for that question. For regional implementation, the FDA uses the SPL terminology set. As many know, there's no one global dose form terminology. There's a lot of discussion and research around that. So one of the first projects that the GIDWG initiated, as TJ mentioned, was to define dose form for global implementation of IDMP. And as you heard from TJ, what that work involved using the EDQM dose form characteristics. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist. We've got a few questions that came in for TJ Chen. And here is the first question. An oral drop suspension method has two codes. What is the difference between them?
Thank you. That's a great question. So the pharmaceutical dose form, oral drop, suspension, is a product that you can instill drop by drop into your mouth, or you can dissolve the product into a glass of water and drink it. So the administration method become so there are two administration methods, right? One is instillation, and based on the EDQM dose form characteristic terminology, it has a code of 13 for instillation. And then of course you can drink it. So that will become swallowing for the administration method. And that has a code as 01919. And because of because we cannot determine which one is a primary use for the product, so both 013 and 019 are used together to generate the PHP ID. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next question, and it's referring to IDMP, and it's different from the WHO drug dictionary. Are there any implications to using the WHO DD?
Now, again, this is a great question. Actually, WHO UMC has been using a mechanism similar to the concept of PHP ID to associate product within the WHO DD or the WHO drug dictionary. So when they see this ISO standard, they immediately recognize that the ISO standard provide a framework that would allow a consistent approach to associate product together. And this is actually a motivation for WHO UMC to join with FDA and EMA to create this working group, because they see the benefit. Now, instead of getting to the product insert, try to understand the information from the product insert to associate product. There's a systematic way to do it. I mean, they still go into the product insert, but now we have more defined approach. So there's not going to be a much difference between the WHO drug dictionary and the ISO IDMP, or more specifically the PHP ID. And WHO UMC is even going to incorporate global PHP ID into the WHO drug dictionary, so that in the future, users can link up medicinal product in different regions based on the same global PHP ID. So that's a great question, and that actually going to help us a lot for the adverse event analysis, especially the example that Sonia just presented, to verify a signal or to do verification of those rare cases in different regions. Because now you don't just rely on the product name or the substance name, which can be very different in different regions, and let alone the language will be different. Now you have global PHP ID allow you to do that. So great question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions for TJ Chen. Here's the next question regarding the transdermal system. Can you further elaborate on key points for choosing 12.5 micrograms per hour rather than the labeled strength of 12 micrograms per hour for the fentanyl transdermal system?
Again, thank you. This is a great question. So, like I mentioned during the presentation, that the business rule is not set on stone. It can change. However, the reason that driven us to pick the 12.5 milligram versus a 12 milligram is because in the product insert, there's a line item says that the maximum release rate is at 12.5 microgram per hour. So because it's a higher dose than it is on the label, we feel like it is important to use that number. And also across different regions, sometimes the approval may take a different major and actually have a different number on the product label itself. So we feel like the information on the product insert might be the most reliable information. So the decision at that point was, let's use the 12.5 that is in the product insert. And once we start to look at product from different regions, right? I mean, you get product from European country or even EMA, centrally approved product, Japan and all that. That may change our mind. I mean, once we see more product, we may have to change the business rule, but for now, based on the limited product from limited region, our decision leaning toward use the product insert for that information. And thank you. That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for TJ Chen in this round, and here's the question. Does the GIDWG work with ISO on the revision of IDMP standards?
Right, great. That's a good question. So yes, a short answer is yes. So as we know that the ISO standard or the ISO IDMP standard defines a framework for people that can uniquely identify a medicinal product, a pharmaceutical product, and substance. Each region or implementers can, based on the ISO standard, and combine with the dose form, regional dose form, like Ron presented earlier, combine with the regional dose form and other terminology that end up creating a regional PHPID that may not be compatible, well, may not be the same with other regions' PHPID. So to maximize the benefit that you see in those three use cases, we want to generate global PHPID, right? So the GIDWG project is based on that use cases. So during this exercise that we have learned a lot to know how we can harmonize to generate global PHPID. Many members of GIDWG are also members of ISO TC 215, in particularly the Working Group 6. That's where the ISO IDMP was developed. So we are sharing our experience. We are helping and working with a group to refine and revise the ISO IDMP standard to make it easier to understand, easier to be implemented, and easier to be harmonized. But with all that said, it's not going to dictate how IDMP standard, by ISO IDMP standard, need to take certain terminology. The goal is to provide a bridge to connect regional generated or regional used dose form terminology, regional generated PHPID. It's just provide a bridge so that we can all link to it and then we can all harmonize when it's necessary. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we have a few questions that just came in for Dr. Sonia Brajovic. And here is the first question. You mentioned that in the FAERS database, suspect drugs are coded to a homegrown dictionary. Could you talk more about how would this dictionary align with GPH PIDs?
Yeah, I'm glad someone asked about this. Yeah, we do use a homegrown dictionary, but it is based on our data. So the backbone of the FAERS product dictionary are the active ingredients which we source from the substance registration system. So these are uni-type ingredient data, right? And then on top of that, we layer the product name and the product attributes data. as sourced from the structured product labeling. So most of the data in the FAIR's product dictionary is based on data that follows the IDMP rules, that is fully compatible with our regional IDMP rules. The dictionary itself is not only for the actual products. It's also a coding dictionary, so it has some coding solutions, which we had to develop to be able to process the incoming data that is sometimes very sketchy. But never mind that part. So because our internal data is compliant with IDMP, through the developed business rules, that data can be easily bridged to the global PHPID data. So yes, our regional data would be compliant with global PHPID, or maybe the word is conformed with the global PHPID. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have one more question for Dr. Blažević. Here's the question. FDA is responsible for the drugs it regulates, not for drugs in other regions. So how would GPHPIDs help in FDA's pharmacovigilance?
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, true. The FDA regulates products on our market, and we take regulatory action only for those products. But at the same time, we do collaborate with other regulators. All the regulators collaborate with each other. And instant availability of global data by active ingredients or at any more granular level really informs one for the reported adverse events, the trends, etc. And I mean, today we will look into data in Vigibase as needed, etc. So the availability of data with global PHPIDs would just make this ability to interrogate global data and just be informed on an adverse event, for example, that may be very rare in our set of data. So one may see what else is similar to it, or the same adverse event for the same substance or substance strength elsewhere. And this helps, this informs. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving up to the beginning of our panel, we have a few more questions that came in for Dr. Ron Fitzmartin. And here's the first question for Dr. Fitzmartin. What are the challenges we currently have to implement IDMP?
Thanks for that question, Ray. Well, there's often challenges with process and people, and usually not so much with technology. And global IDMP implementation is not immune to this. However, there is more momentum to implement globally than ever before. And that's brought on by, as I mentioned earlier, the collaboration with EMA, WHO, UMC, and of course, FDA's participation as well, and other stakeholders around the globe. We have to make these standards fit for implementation globally. ISO has been super supportive to make this happen. So we are pushing ahead. We do need, as we're starting to focus on implementation and use in the coming years, we do need an endorsement, if you will, of the global identifiers. There's no global identifier for dose form. We have identified a mechanism to establish global dose form to describe global dose forms. There's no agreement on a global substance. identifier. Number of regions have their own substance identifier. FDA has the UNI. So there's much more work to be done. And I would say that we're knocking down more hurdles than are going up. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions for Dr. Fitzmartin, and here's the next question. Have there been discussions about leveraging IDMP in ECTD submissions?
Well, interesting question. So certainly the IDMP standards were developed for both marketed products, so post-marketing, and for investigational products, pre-market. And however, for FDA, just speaking now for us and our policy that we set forth in our guidance, is that we are now focused primarily on post-market implementation of IDMP. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks for responding to that question. We do have one more question for Dr. Fitzmartin, and here's the question. Will NDCs be replaced or will they continue on?
Well, let me make this perfectly clear. This is a good question. There's no, I repeat, there's no plan, there's no thought to replace the NDC. The NDC really equates to our regional NPID. So no, there are no plans to replace the NDC. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. Moving on to our next panelist, we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. We'll bring in Dr. TJ Chen, and here's the first question for Dr. Chen. Is there any discussion about the use of IDMP levels and 3D barcoding serialization, and will that change 3D barcoding parameters?
Thank you. That's a great question. So, as Ron mentioned earlier in his presentation, that the MPID is a regional PHPID. I mean, regional identifier, medicinal product identifier. So there's no global influence into this medicinal product identifier. So we will continue to use the NDC code. And as I think the person who asked this question is familiar with the upcoming potential NDC revision to include additional information, and then to embed that into the 3D barcode as a potential solution for that. So now IDMP I will not change any of that direction. Whatever barcode or NDC revision in the future will not be influenced by IDMP and will not impact the IDMP implementation. We'll continue to use whatever that FDA decided for the US product, and that will be the format for the medicinal product ID. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got the next question for TJ Chen. For products with multiple characteristic dose forms, why list 2 codes for the characteristics? Instead, why not have a new single code created that represents both dose form characteristics?
Right. That's a good question. We have discussed about that, and some of the question came up. Well, first when it came up was a chewable tablet, right? So based on the EDQM administration method, it has 2 values: chewing and then swallowing. So we have been debating about whether we use just chewing or just swallowing, or we create a new one for chew and swallow, because I mean they are obviously product like gum, you chew but then you spit out, right? So and in the end, the decision was that it might not be wise for us, I mean, being GIDWG or WHO UMC, to create our own list of administration method on top of what EDQM already created and defined. And also to request EDQM to create a new term, like again, chewable tablet for chew and swallow, may not be the fast approach, because every time when we see a new product, when we see a product with combination of administration method, we will have to request a new term. So the decision was then just use the combination of the term, because in the end, it's a new identifier, right? So like back to the example earlier, the oral drop suspension. So do we create installation and swallowing, or do we just do 013019? That combination actually is a new code, and that will satisfy that need, because that will call it out as a unique administration method. So that was the decision. And again, the business rule is not set in stone. This was the thinking that was the best approach. Once we go through more product, we may change a thought. But once we publish that business rule, maybe we get more input to, it may influence our decision. But for now, we think the easiest way is to utilize EDQM term and not to create our own terminology and not to maintain that terminology system. But thank you. That's a good question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have another question as a multi-part question regarding IDMP. And is there a list of substances in the scope of IDMP, and is it publicly available? And also, is there a plan to include all substances registered with the health authorities who are a part of this project?
Again, thank you. This is a good question, and it's obvious that we need to include all of the substance, right? I mean, for the product that is registered. The current approach is working on the substance that are mostly, well, that has more product with that substance, and also more important. I mean, for example, the COVID vaccine, right? I mean, we don't have many so-called products associated with each of the substance, because pretty much it's a brand name product. You have one product, but this is an important product. So we would include that into the first round of the global PHPID and global substance ID generation. So the first round, actually, for the end-to-end testing, we have identified 150 substances, and we are getting all of the products from the region that participated in the end-to-end testing to include product for that 150 substance. And just about a week ago, FDA submitted 51,353 products based on that substance list, 150. And in fact, we have not included all of the substance that was identified, and we're already up to 51,000 products. So it's a very ambitious project, and we have to take it step by step. And when we publish the substance, yes, we will. I mean, once we get all of the substance ID assigned, the intention is to make those available, publicly available. So I hope I answered your question, and thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you to all of our presenters and panelists for the great presentations and answering numerous questions that came in.